And
Oh my
I am here
goodness.
as always, first Thursday of the month. Wow, with Ethan from
Oh
Outlaw
yeah.
HQ. And I just saw the body of that. So last time we're going to start. Good morning, everybody. I hope
Good
everyone is
morning, everyone. Sorry,
good
I was
morning,
just getting
Ethan.
ready to knit while we chatted.
I know, and all I saw was this incredible piece of colorwork zoom up in front of the screen. And last time you and I spoke, you were sleeving, you were out on sleevecation. There we go. Look at those. Wow, you've rocketed along with that. In fact, I feel decidedly lazy in comparison.
Well, as like color work for me, and I think for you, goes faster usually. So all over color work, I figured would be even faster, and it's on a 4mm needle, so
Yeah.
you can really crank. Even though the sleeves are like just over 100 stitches per round, it's basically like knitting the equivalent of 4 hats. And I'm a really fast hat knitter. The speed bump with the sleeves is that as you start binding off, you have to switch to doing color work flat. So that whole cap is worked flat, which I don't know about the rest of you, but unless I'm like feeling masochistic, so going to knit a Marie Wallen pattern. Um, look, they're the most beautiful color work patterns in the world. I think everyone can agree, but like, oh my God, they're physically painful. Like
they are. It is one of those sit on a desert island or in a Scottish cabin and just
if I was
they're
like
beautiful
out
though.
on Fair Isle with the other 72
Mm.
people and the puffins,
Mm.
I would think I would feel inspired to knit one of those. But like,
Yeah.
and she
Anywho,
doesn't steek. Like that's the thing. You know, a lot
yeah.
of Shetland knitters have kind of adapted the steek because for those of you at home, steeking is a Norwegian and Nordic collection, including the Icelanders and the Danes and all of the Swedes and the Finns. Let's not leave anyone out. And if I've forgotten any, sorry, Latvia and Lithuania, if you're feeling left out. But steeking is not a Shetland thing. In Shetland, color work was always knit flat with purl rows and knit rows, which is why you get those super subtle color gradations.
Yeah.
Some modern Shetland knitters, like Mary Jane Mucklestone and Ella Gordon, have adapted steeking into Shetland style. So they're doing Shetland style yokes, but they're still steeking them open, right? But Marie Wallen is not having any of that. Not even for a second. Like, y'all had better be ready to knit flat without salvages and figure it out.
Yeah.
So, not that they're not the most incredible knits, and if you have, if we end up somehow stranded on pick an island around here together, actually, you know what? If anyone would like to send Marie and I to a small remote island with several cases of wine,
I'm glad you started with the wine before the yarn.
Oh my God, I know us. Like, there's
As
many
long as
things
it's
we could list.
not, as long as it's not pine infused beer, I hear we should be good.
Yeah. No, I am allergic to pine. There was an incident where I drank some beer that had a really beautiful flavor, and I was like, "This is great." I had 3 of them, and for those of you who know me, I drink the way that I talk, fast, often, and without any sort of stopping. So the fact that after 3 beers I was feeling the way I was got suspicious, looked into it, there was pine in it.
Yeah. Anywho, yeah, it's so where are you at with the body now? So hold it up.
So I've made a little bit of progress.
Whoa. And the name of the pattern again for everybody, because I've forgotten.
This is Tapestry by Veronique Avery.
There you go, Tapestry.
So it's an oversized, overlapping front cardigan. It has this repetitive stitch motif that is the same on the sleeves and the body. For those of you at home, the sleeves and the body do not have to line up for it to look good. I would call this overall color work. This is stranded, but not Fair Isle. The French would refer to this as a jacquard fabric because it's producing a consistent textural and color effect. But I think that jacquard knitting is kind of out of a lot of knitters' playbooks. It's not something that you're going to come across. It's a little unusual. Really, only Martin Story possibly has done other jacquard pieces in the past few years. It is very demanding at first because with jacquard knitting, there's no edging. So you're working right from the edge, this is the steek, but you're working right from the edge upwards. So it actually begins to curl pretty much immediately as you work.
Yeah.
So it is a little trickier. What you do is you go back, and after everything is steeked and cut open, you pick up a continuous facing. So one of the challenges with some of the more Japanese and French technical approaches to knitting, because they're actually more similar than they are different, is that they expect you to be able to manage massive amount of stitches and to hit consistent gauge. So this pattern is very row gauge dependent, which isn't something that we talk about a lot as modern
No.
knitters, because row gauge is very easy to fudge usually. But
Mm.
in this case, you have to hit a precise number of rows before you start decreasing. And then you have to hit a precise distance without hitting a precise number of rows. But you need to be plus or minus 2 decrease rows, basically.
Mm.
So your row gauge has to be within 4 rows, or roughly off by no more than half a stitch.
Yeah.
Um, which is...
But see, the nice thing with that though is that pattern is done in your new Rebel base.
It is, yes.
And it's that beautiful, lovely, grippy base. And
So
I don't know
grippy.
about you, but I find things that have got a little bit more to them, a bit toothier, often generally easier to get row gauge than something that's a little bit slinky or stretchy.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
What I'm going to show you is it's easier sometimes to measure your row gauge on the inside of color work like this. If you're someone who has consistent floats, right? You can visually see from the striations each individual row. So instead of trying to count the stitches, if this is all over color work and you know that every single row, so in this case, it's out of 32 rows, out of 31 rows, 2 are only knit in one color. So you can measure a full repeat of this color work on the wrong side and just count the strands.
Yeah.
Which I find a lot easier. The grippier yarn, for sure, the easier it is to get row gauge. And also the nice part about this is, and for those of you who have steeked at home, if you have not worked with a grippy yarn like this, I'm not going to reinforce the steek before I cut it.
No.
I'm literally just going to cut it. Like it says to hand sew up, but there's no need to be honest. And
I sometimes will run a little line of sort of crab stitch, with crochet. That's what I
like to do that.
Yeah. But that's
I like to go, so what I normally do is I go down to, I work at the same hook size as the gauge needle for the fabric, but I go down 2 yarn weights. So in this case, this is knit in our fingering weight or 4-ply, but it's a woolen spun 4-ply. So what I will do is I will use a single ply woolen spun lace, like a
leftovers from that shawl that you were knitting the other day.
Yeah, probably the leftovers. Probably that Garthenor. Actually, that's a great idea. And I'll just crochet up along. And I don't know if you do this, but what I do is I actually catch the leading legs, the leading and trailing legs of each stitch. So I smush them together like this. I make a little stitch sandwich, and I crochet through the first leg of the second stitch and the second leg of the first stitch. And I just run a simple crochet chain up. A little bit loose, but because you're working at a finer gauge yarn at the same gauge, it follows the same row gauge as the pattern, but it also kind of melts away. And then this has a continuous facing. So that means I'm going to go along the bottom edge, all the way up the one front steek, around the back of the neck shaping and shoulder shaping, down the other side, and down the bottom, back to the first pickup stitch at the front corner in one continuous pickup. So it's going to be just over 800 stitches. And then I'm going to knit a facing outwards.
Yep.
So that's going to be roughly 12 rows at 800 plus stitches. And I think that it's one of those things where we talk about this stuff a lot, and you're hearing huge stitch counts at home, you're hearing all of this stuff, but relative to the other knitting that you actually do, that's probably only like knitting 10 rows of the body of a sweater.
Yeah. It's nothing.
So it always sounds really big and seems really scary until you get into it. A lot of these kind of like massive, I would refer to them as like an heirloom project, because they're going to last. Because like, no offense, everyone, I will not be wearing this every day. First of all, it is in some cases 4 layers of woolen spun 4-ply yarn. So the equivalent of bulky.
Yeah.
And it's huge. Like, it's going to be
Mm.
huge, which is the point. And I am definitely doing this for the fun of it, not
Mm.
for like anything else. And many of you at home might be sitting there going, that does not look fun. Trust me, it is. Because the pattern's so easy to memorize. And the nice part about color work like this is you don't need the chart after the first repeat because you can just look at the knitting.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I just refer back to it. But
Yeah.
I'm really loving it. This has been in my queue for 5 years now. And I'm just chipping away at those queued up sweaters.
Well, that was from one of the Brooklyn. That was from that Brooklyn Tweed winter collection, wasn't it? Our
Winter
favorite.
2015, along
Yeah.
with,
Yeah.
I have something I prepared earlier, along with Agnes
Yeah.
and Chain
Great
Link, which
collection.
is living over on a mannequin at the moment. There she is.
Oh, look at there she is. I've still got the chain link, and I was so determined to do it over lockdown, and then it didn't happen. And we all know what happened with lockdown, but it was it's fantastic.
Yeah.
Oh, so that looks good. Now, what else have we got? What else have you got in your little show and tell pile before I show you what I've got?
Oh, well, we do have the very last of some things. I'm going to make everyone moderately nauseous for 2 seconds. I'm going to actually pick you up. We're going to go on a very brief journey because we've now gotten to the point where there's too much yarn to easily show you. Whoop. So we have a table full of
Look
Rebel.
at that. You have been working wee Rory the Skeiner very, very hard, haven't you?
Yeah, well, that's what he's here for.
It is.
So we have a whole table full of yarn now. We've got
Wow, that looks fantastic.
Yeah, so there's a little bit of fleece and forage left. We have lots of the Aeon still if you are looking to make a chain link like mine. And, you can celebrate that fabulous stitch definition with me. We have a ton of different colors. Some of them don't appear very well on screen. We're sorry for the limits of technology, but your color work dreams are ready to come true. We have 2 more weekends of things coming out. And then last but not least, in a flurry of highly technical knitting, I finished Orime by Veronique Avery.
Great.
So this is another great pattern that I have recently knit up. It has just some beautiful detailing. Our mannequin lacks shoulders. She's very slender through the shoulders, so she doesn't show it off quite as well. But it has a beautiful back detailing with just some simply sublime decreases and a great collar. So if you're looking for a 4-ply pattern that layers over everything and works on a variety of bodies.
That and boho sport would look amazing.
Yes, no, exactly. It really rewards a dense gauge. It's knit down on a 3.25 millimeter needle.
Yeah.
So don't be afraid. I knitted up in Baby Bandit, actually. Just trying to show off the versatility. Now, Baby Bandit is very soft, which is a nice feature, but that also means that Baby Bandit has a tendency to grab onto itself. So if you're going to knit something in Baby Bandit, you have to go down quite a few needle sizes. So I actually knit that sample on a 3 millimeter, and I made a gauge adjustment, knowing that it would shift the rows by roughly a 1/2 centimeter over the total length of the garment. I added a 1/2 centimeter in some very sneaky places.
Yeah. But that's what you need to do sometimes.
Yes. And the benefit of that is it's fully seamed, as per usual. Shocker. But it's only 2 pieces. So
actually, I'm going to pull that one up because I've got Veronique sitting on my Revelry here at the minute. So what was that one called again?
That one is Orime. So the pattern, each collection that the Brooklyn Tweed team works on is normally inspired by something. So that one is from a collection based on origami, which also has a fabulous Noragon pullover in it that has twisted stitches, which looks a lot like her new Twisted Stitch book. That would look absolutely amazing in some of the
one
DKs that you have right now.
Lines? Is that the one?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, I'll put that one. I'll throw that one.
I think would be great in your vintage abroad or possibly.
Oh yeah, yeah. Just looking at that. Oh my gosh.
Would it not just shine in that?
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
And again, like, I'm a big proponent of the drop shoulder lately. I don't know where this has come from, but drop shoulders for days, they fit everyone. They're flattering on so many people. If you're new to easing sleeve caps, which can be very intimidating, I remember back when it intimidated me, you know, that is the way to go, because easing in a drop shoulder is so straightforward, and it's so simple if you're someone who has a shorter torso, but a slightly larger upper arm measurement. It's so easy to make that adjustment. You just do some extra increases at the top of the sleeve and then just ease it in more, because the garment's already running straight up and down. So you can really modify a lot of those drop shoulder patterns to fit very comfortably.
And that was the thing, see, with Rebel, that was a drop shoulder, but it had a really slim fit sleeve.
Yep.
And it worked beautifully. It was easy peasy. Well, I had been doing some of this. I showed this on Monday. Oh God, I'm in the middle of a row again. I do this every time.
Well, at least we've got hobbies.
I know. Hold on a second here. See, this is the trouble in my house, because of course we've got this. It's been so full on, but this is where I'm doing some extra length.
Ooh, I love it.
So that's where the colours go.
I'm super into it.
Yeah, so usually with this Miss Jane, I would have already have gone and finished off the bottom, but I've decided that I am just going to add a little bit extra length than what I would normally do, just because I've got so many at a certain length. And as you said, it's just nice to mix these things up.
Yes.
On the floor. Right, so that's where I'm at with that. So I'm still chugging away with that. But, so of course, we got the new vintage yarn in, and we've got the vintage being our theme for the month. And I just quickly went and grabbed just some of the what I would call more neutral tones, new shades. So for those that don't know our vintage range, vintage is a fantastic yarn. It's a full folded yarn. So it's made from 100% New Zealand wool, very long fiber, and we've done it in such a way that it's a very, very sort of smooth construction.
Nice,
and it's done, and it's done quite deliberately for two reasons. One, to give you really good stitch definition if you're wanting to do any textured stitches. And also, two, it's not treated. So then that way, if you're wanting to do colour work, it will do colour work beautifully. It will give you great stitch definition. As I mentioned the other day, this is a yarn that's very near and dear to my heart. It was the first yarn that I ever worked on when I started doing new product development. And I knitted all my children's garments, DK garments and this stuff. I absolutely loved it. So we've gone and pulled together some, and I've just pulled out 5 of the new colours, and I'm just going to show them to you now.
Ooh.
So, and the reason I picked these 5 is because just sitting on my desk, and I just literally grabbed it as I was heading out the door, were all the scraps and bits and pieces left over from our sample knits from the lovely Dell. So those are, those there in Pulse. And I grabbed these because I just wanted to show the Pulse, the Flight, and the Vintage have all been spun to the same count. And that has been a very deliberate thing. And we wanted to do that so it enabled people to actually jump around across ranges. So if you're going to undertake a project where you need different colours, you're able to have a wider selection of colours to choose from. And so like one of the things, so this one here is Tempo. This has been one of our really popular ones in Pulses, this really dark, broody shade. So there's terracottas and blues and jades and greens in this. Now, automatically, and you and I think can talk about this with colour. So automatically, you know how you often want to go matchy, right? You know, because that's
me, matchy, not even once.
No, but you know what I mean? You sort of, so quite often you would instantly say go with something like that.
Yeah, but it would look great with like a fawn.
Exactly. So, well, funny you should mention that. Here is one I happened to have prepared earlier. So this is part of the reason why I pulled these out, is because quite often, if you're wanting to match something, so like if you were doing a shawl, this would be a really great example. So if you were doing a shawl and you're wanting to fade things through, so you're wanting to have your color work sort of shift or move across, if you're doing some, so maybe some
sort of
mosaics, pictures,
Wow.
and you're moving across and having it.
We don't plan this, by the way, guys. We're just like, we're in sync.
All the time.
Yeah.
Literally, as I pressed live, I said to him, "Oh, remember, we'll just make it up as we go along. We'll be fine.
We got this."
So, this is when you would
you're
choose
shifting
colors
back
like
and
this.
forth, like with that Barnstable shawl that has 2 DK weight yarns, you're only using 2 colors throughout. It's meant for one variegated and one solid, but it creates these subtle geometric patterns. I think it was released by Malabrigo ages ago.
Yeah.
We've all knit one.
And also, too, if you're wanting to do something, some really subtle striping, and you just wanted it to give you that appearance,
or
that
even if you're
illusion.
like doing color shifting in brioche, like if you're doing 2-color brioche, and I mean, Stephen is a wonderful gift to this world, but you can take Stephen West's work and reduce the color palette down and do something beautiful with those more, I don't want to call his colors unsophisticated, but less less aggressive, and create those beautiful long color flows inside of brioche by keeping a consistent color on the main side that you want facing the public, and just changing and flowing through all those colors on the opposite side.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is where the vintage comes in. So this is the steeper one, but I've also pulled out, this is one of the new colors, which is called Rosewater. And see, look at what happens if you were to do that. So this is a warm.
Yeah.
So if you're really wanting to make this pop, the whole trick is you contrast, isn't it?
Contrast.
And you've got to get that contrast. And so again, here's another example. This one here is Quiver, which is that one there, which of course your natural inclination is to throw it with rosewater.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. But really what you want to be doing is you want to be throwing it with something
creamier. Yes. And we've talked about this in the past. So, color contrast as far as going light and dark is one option. But when you double up that contrast, like the rosewater with the...
Oh, the tempo.
Yes, with rosewater with tempo, you are doing a color wheel contrast. So, like splitting the thirds basically, but you're also contrasting the shades. So it's more like vibrantly electric without being difficult to look at, because we've all made the unfortunate neon blue and neon yellow decision in the past with color work. Do you remember that Lopi sweater that had like the fade? It was when they had that neon range come out. And so for everyone at home, if you never followed Istex, they release roughly 2 pattern books a year. And every so often they bring back a pattern. So they 4 or 5 years ago, 6 years ago, maybe, they brought back a pattern from the 80s in neons, except yarn dyeing has come a long way. So yarns have gotten brighter, and it faded from like neon electric blue to neon electric yellow. Guilty of owning a lot of that neon yellow yarn. But it was eye searing. Like you couldn't, like I saw the sample at the Barocco booth and like, it was a my eyes moment, because it was just so bright. It looked like it had batteries installed. So, but what you're talking about there is taking a more modern approach to color contrasting, right?
Yeah.
And it's playing with those different tones and shades and knowing what's going to work across a bigger palette. And I think that we've gotten a little fixated in the knitting world about all of the like rules of color work.
Yeah.
But the beautiful thing about what you're showing here with the big palettes of vintage in the five colors of pulse, am I remembering correctly?
Hold on, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7.
7 colors of pulse is... There are beautiful 2-color pullovers where you could take those bold shades. So I'm thinking like Tensho by Diana Walla, anything from Tin Can Knits. You can always just strip back the number of colors to 2. Like imagine an almanac where you're using all those tiny little motifs and you're using 1 color of pulse throughout in one of the really strongly contrasting vintage shades, one of the new ones, one of the old ones, it doesn't matter, in the background. Or you could even do, brace yourselves, an aggressive Shetland background fade with the pulse where you're using those subtly related tones in the
Yeah.
vintage and going like every 5 rows, changing the background color and knitting with that same pulse throughout. Like that would be, sorry.
And again, it kind of, I mean, we've spoken about this a lot. It's about playing around and being fearless, not being afraid to try something and do something. And I'm really pleased to see so many people have been very excited about it. So vintage we've got on sale. We're on a spotlight for this month. So it's this is the time to get it. It's the cheapest it will be. It won't be that way for next month and for the sale. But so I couldn't help myself. So the theme this month is vintage. And I don't know about you, but I do rather have a large collection. I already had a large collection of vintage patterns.
I don't know what you're talking about.
No.
I don't have any.
And I
He
have to say
lies
I was
blithely.
gifted some as well. And I've been given another book too. I've got some great stuff I'm going to bring you over the month. But I just dove in because I found this one in my collection from 1958.
I love it. I love it. And I was talking with a friend from, that would be amazing. There are so many great, if you're ever sitting around and you're someone who knits for a male-bodied person in your life, who might not be as shape adventurous as this creature before you, these vintage pattern books have actually exciting menswear in them a lot of the time.
Well, hold that thought, caller. Hold that thought. I know. So this one here, I just pulled this out, but I have to show you this because I just cried laughing. It was so funny.
Oh my God.
So they had what they called now in the contents. So this one here is edited by James.
Oh, look at that.
Even progressive all the way back then. Edited by James. So they had what they called. Now, what did James say here? This is a practical and exciting book, and it answers the practicality with men's sweaters, a baby cardigan, and boys' pullovers. Exciting with jackets from Vienna, coolly classic, a hat, as well as a slick coat for the fuller figure. So this is here is the practical and the exciting. Going to Vienna, look at that.
I love it. I'm not even kidding. I am
dead
serious.
I mean, but see, look at the beautiful shaping on that cardigan. I mean, it is gorgeous, right? Absolutely
it's fabulous.
So if one does not quite have the trim 30-inch figure that requires to wear that Vienna cardigan, that's okay. That's okay, because you've got this to look forward to, my friend. You've got this to look forward to because fashion begins at 40, don't you know?
Yes.
And then they have it there, sort of a
Fashion
similar.
begins at 40.
I know.
Look at those pockets.
I know.
Take that, patriarchy.
I know. But what I love about this is what cracked me up. Is it was so this is a full button up cardigan, right?
Yep.
Look at those raglan sleeves.
I love it. Like this is my kind of knitting is the problem.
All those buttons. Anywho, it starts at 40-inch and goes through the size ranges from 40 to 46-inch. So not really fuller figure, just full figure.
So three more people could wear this. They've gone out on a limb and they found 3 other people around the office and were like, wait, you didn't fit that sample? Well, no. we can help.
I know. And the other thing that I did actually have a wee giggle at too is that they obviously, so this is a thing about female anatomy that all of us of a certain age that are in here will understand, is that, particularly after you've had children, the bust shape that one had at 21 is quite often, I mean, they do talk about the matronly bosom or the matronly bust. I'd love to know how flat-chested she was when she started, because I tell you what, by the time, even now, there's no, I mean, I was like, wow.
That sounds
I did have a
happening.
good giggle. I did have a good giggle. So this one was and I think I will bring you. So I've already bought. No, did I grab it? Did I? No, I didn't. I already popped up Derek, which was a colorwork pattern. So you were talking about colorwork before,
Yes.
and I forgot to grab the leaflet. It's sitting on my desk, but it was a great example of colorwork, all worked in pieces. So if you've missed out on that, that went out on the newsletter on Monday. If you go to actually the website. Oh no, it's out, yeah, it went out on Monday. So there is that. I think that's that pattern. Yeah, that
I
pattern.
actually got it in my newsletter.
You did, yeah. It's an absolute cracker. But you were right. So you were saying before about men's patterns, and
Yes.
these are two that I think I will get done up. So before people go, oh, why are we Marie copying all of these and such? If it's more than 50 years, copyright runs for 50 years generally on printed patterns. That's the information that I've been led. So all of these are 50 years plus old. So
I'm going to be a little crass. They've made their money or they're dead. So like, let's move on. Maybe both.
look at that one.
Yes. That is fabulous.
I love this. I cannot tell you, every time I've had a dollar, particularly now because all this classic styling is coming back, you
Yeah.
know, and asking, have you got something like this in a modern context? Trying to find these is almost impossible. I love that one.
Honestly was on a hunt for just a crew neck, the old kind of Ralph Lauren-esque, like 3x6 with the pearl stitch in between. The 6 is cabled,
Yeah.
the 3 is plain knit. We remember those oh yes. Yes. Beautiful. But those patterns used to be like a dime a dozen, the one that I'm describing. Right,
all
back
the
in the
time.
day, you couldn't shake a stick without hitting one. And the only one I could find was from Vogue Knitting 1982. Apparently, they stopped making them after that.
Stop it. I've actually probably got that sitting here, you know.
Of course.
I've got enough old Vogue books here.
So if you also love that vintage style, everyone at home, and you are like, but none of those things are going to fit me, there are a number of great designers out there who have taken vintage patterns and shifted them up to more modern bust sizes. They're all available for you on the Joys of Ravelry. Susan Crawford is, of course, well known for taking out of copyright patterns, just like what Marie is talking about. So patterns that are past the copyright on them and have become public knowledge, just like, you could theoretically print your own Charles Dickens. No one owns that anymore. Don't. It's a lot of paper. But Susan Crawford and some other members of different pattern groups online have gone ahead and taken vintage patterns and just done the math to extend the size range. So those are a great example. And I was chatting with someone recently. I don't know about you, about why here in New Zealand we favor 8-ply yarn over worsted and 10-ply. Because worsted and 10-ply.
That's a great question.
Well, okay, so there is an answer. Worsted and 10-ply reigns supreme, but only in one continent of the entire world, only in North America.
North America, yeah.
Yeah, so it takes a little bit more technical skill to produce DK weight yarn, because normally it has to have a 4-fold construction. It doesn't necessarily work well as a 2-fold, whereas you can make 2-fold worsted weight because the plying does not need to be as precise, right? Mostly in the past, because of its wearability, DK was the choice yarn for Europe and the UK, largely because it doesn't get quite as extreme temperature-wise in many of the places. And in most of the places where it does get so extremely cold temperature-wise, they do a lot of stranded color work. And stranded color work on worsted weight, even though it's only marginally thicker, is much more difficult. So in New Zealand, due to the temperature ranges that we experience and where most of our patterns would have been sourced from and where all of our milling equipment would have been sourced from, because North Americans had their own foundries and made some very questionable milling equipment.
See, all our milling equipment is Irish. Mostly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So DK weight for days, right? Or it does the jump up to Aran, skipping the worsted weight, because worsted is not a historically traditional knitting garment weight. That is a North American invention, as far as I am aware. Because even if you're looking at things like the Icelandic spun yarns, which are the only ones that rival age-wise for consistency,
Well, and a lot of it came down to, and what we're talking about was the thickness of the single yarn that you could make,
and how it gets plied together.
So the most common single that we have is, so for example, in the vintage.
Yeah.
So a really common single count, for example, is what we call a 120 tex. And we talk about often what we call common count yarns. So what would happen in the day is you would have a 120 tex yarn, which would be like a sort of a 2-ply single.
Yep.
And then you would 2-fold that to make a 4-ply yarn. So that would be what we call a 240 bar 2. Then you would 3-fold that in order to get sort of a sport weight. You 4-fold it to get a DK. And once you sort of headed sort of up the scale, up the chain, once you get into 5-folds, things start looking a bit ropey. So you would only go that far with a DK. And they would only generally produce probably, they would often do 100 tex, 120 tex, 150 tex, and 180 tex with a common sort of count. 4, and then it was however many folds to give you the weights in between, and that's sort of pretty much how they, I definitely know in the European tradition how they did it. Sorry, I just found this. So this is this book here. If anyone has been to an op shop, if you're in New Zealand or even further afield, oh hey, Charles is in the house. Gandhi, hey Charles.
Hi, Charles.
So this one here is called Knitting in Vogue. Volume number 3. So this is what Ethan was talking about, the reworking of patterns from vintage patterns into modern. So this one here was, and one does not have her glasses. Where are her glasses so she can see things? Oh, don't poke her eye out. This one was printed in 1985. And I mean, yeah, older than you, doll. I picked this up at an op shop, and I can't tell you how many times I've seen this in charity shops. So if you see this one is particularly good. And this is exactly what Ethan was talking about.
Yes, that's the one.
That's the one. As soon as you were describing it, I was like, I think I've got it in a book back there. And this is what I'm talking about. It's about being able to sort of take those patterns and do it.
Them.
Oh, see, here we go. Charles is saying, for my money, give me a smaller gauged yarn. Looks and wears so much better, especially for menswear, to be knitted on 3.25 or 3.5 millimeter needle. Just saying, Charles, you are preaching to the converted here. And I mean, gosh, you did. I mean, that twig.
Yes, my twigs is a 5-ply, so sport weight yarn on a 2.75 millimeter
exactly
needle. And it's bulletproof.
Oh, totally. It's amazing. Absolutely amazing. And see, even these DK yarns, these 480 bar 4s, this is our vintage in the crew. I mean, all of these knitted on a 3.75 or a 3.5 millimeter needle. Amazing. Particularly if you're wanting a garment that's going to sit and wear.
Yeah. And if you're thinking about like really dense patterns that last a long time, Geiger by Nora Gone is of course knit down on a 3.75 millimeter with a 3-fold construction, 100% Targhee, tightly spun, like Jaeger method spun, DK weight yarn. So like that's the kind of thing where you're going to get longevity out of a garment. Like, don't be afraid of dense gauge. Julie Hoover, never afraid of a dense gauge. Also never afraid of a loose gauge. She tends to veer wildly back and forth. And, I'm not a big fan of pushing gauge, which is where we knit with a slowly bigger needle. For men's or women's garments, not interested. If you're going to be wearing it all day, it'll just pill in a way that's not easy to keep removing.
Yeah. And it's just, and also, again, about keeping things together. So back to my favorite. All of these.
Fabulous.
I know. All of these, there's 2 of them there in DK, and this one here, which is sort of like actually this one is really amazing. It's sort of like a ribbed, it looks like it's got really tight cables going up the center, then with sort of garter stitch ribbings across it. And I haven't got that one, but I have to say, geometrically, it's actually a really smart piece of design. I hope
that is a smart piece of design.
It is a smart piece of design. That's in a DK, but everything else in there is either 4-ply or 3-ply.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess we, there's ease and convenience, isn't it? You sort of want the speed and getting stuff out. And I have to say, like, having knit a couple of DK patterns after being on finer gauges for a while, you rip through them and they're super, super, super fast. But there is something really
I haven't knit a
satisfaction.
DK weight pattern
Yeah.
in. I'm actually. I did use a custom spun woolen spun to make someone a cabled cardigan for Christmas. But that is the first worsted DK weight pattern I think that I have knit since last July.
Yeah.
I mean, I primarily knit with fingering weight and lighter.
Yeah.
I am a well-known monster though. And I find that as long as you stay like marginally, I call it marginally monogamous, everyone, because like it is hard to necessarily move around. Like this is not easy to take with me any longer. I don't know why. It also requires an entire bag of yarn. Like, let's be clear here. It's not like I'm wandering around with bits and bobs. Like, I have 100 grams of each color, and there are 5 colors involved in this. So, like, moving this requires a tote bag roughly this big. So, like, I get it. But the nice part, too, and again, definitely always going to be a bigger fan of knitting in pieces than knitting in the round. But knitting on a fine gauge means that the fabric actually compacts quite small. And 100 grams of 4-ply gives you more than a sleeve or gives you an entire front or back for someone my size up to a fairly big size in a menswear piece. And they're so easy to move around with you, right? Like if you're sitting at the surgery waiting to see the doctor, or, you know, God forbid that you're taking some sort of public transit somewhere. And I mean that not in the sense I'm pro public transit, but like we've all been stuck on public transit somewhere in this country for many hours longer than we anticipated.
Yeah.
Right. So like I'm a big believer in having something with you, and like we can only knit so many socks.
Yeah. I mean, that's why I have to admit I love hats, but for that reason, because my detesting of knitting socks is very public knowledge. So that's, which is why, you know, I do so many hats. Actually, Charles is saying he's inspired to do a collection from some classic movies. Yes, that would be great, Charles. That would be exceptionally great.
I would like to put a request for some Roman holiday inspired pieces off the hop.
Stop it.
That would be great.
And you know what? And that, you know, and see, this is the thing. I mean, bring back, Charles, you need to bring back the twin set. That's my challenge to you, Charles.
Charles, I would like a lace weight twin set pattern.
I'm not
kidding. I've been hankering for one for ages.
Absolutely. He's put here Kiwi hats, yes, because actually I don't know whether everyone remembers the incredible twisted stitch traveling stitch hat that I did last year, the Kiwi hat, which Charles designed. We've got the sample here. It's amazing. And I have to say that hat went everywhere with me. And what I loved about it, you were talking before about what you're knitting now. About reading your stitches. That was one of those hat patterns that you had it there, but it was really simple. Like you would start, you know, reading your stitches and knowing where you were going. So there you go, Charles. Roman holiday, yes, lace weight twin set. I think potentially, Charles, my twin set wearing days could be over.
No, for me, I will absolutely wear a lace weight.
Yeah, you would. You would.
I like, especially if it's got like a mock turtleneck on the base of the twin set. Like, sign me up for that. Like, vintage Coco Chanel realness.
Yeah,
I'm here for it, everyone, and I will knit it. This is the other problem. Like,
see, and then I have to admit, and if you do a knitted houndstooth well, I know.
Yeah, like a houndstooth drop waisted sweater with a set-in sleeve.
Anyway,
bringing it back.
That's a tangent we're going down. Now, just speaking of tangents, we all know that both Outlaw and ourselves featured in the latest.
I have one more copy sitting on my counter if someone wants it.
Oh, there you go. One more copy left. So that was featuring the beautiful Georgie, designed by Libby Johnson,
Yes.
knitted in Bohemia Sport. So, of course, this is a magazine that every knitter has on their coffee table.
I have 2 copies.
Yeah. And you're thinking, okay, Marie, why have you got the Motor Caravana?
Let's do it.
I know, it's strange but true. The reason I do not do anything by chance. There is a reason for this. And it is because we noticed a month or two ago, actually it was just prior to Christmas, a lot of people have been traveling around, locals in motorhomes, because for the first time ever, so that COVID, is that without the international tourists rolling around, Kiwis getting access to those motorhomes at a really reasonable price, because they're not cheap, but they've had some fantastic deals. And a lot of New Zealanders as well have actually taken the opportunity to invest and purchase motorhomes and caravans in sort of the last 12 months, so they can truly explore our wonderful backyard. And we really have noticed a huge uptick of people who are doing it.
I'm
and
sensing a next summer documentary series, Ethan and Marie do 2 weeks in a caravan.
Oh my gosh, Ethan and Marie on the road.
Right?
Oh gosh, could you imagine me trying to sell that to my husband? Oh, hon, I just need you to stay home with the kids for a month while I go on the road with Ethan. Oh dear.
Amazing. Okay.
Anywho, we
Motor
have
Caravaner.
a whole load of parking. I mean, if you've been to our store here, it's massive. We've got a massive amount of car parking out the front. And this particular day, Claire and I got to work, and there were, no word of a lie, 4 motorhomes parked outside with people. They were waiting for us to open so they could come in. And we thought, actually, we could never have done that in the old shop. We just didn't have the parking there. So there we go.
Yes.
Yes. So if you are somebody who is a motorhomer and you get this magazine, because if you're a member of the New Zealand Motorhome Association, apparently this comes out to you, or you're somebody who is a caravaner or a motorhomer, and
you just love the magazine like yours truly.
Yes, and you're hitting the road and you do want to come visit, because we're on a main arterial here in Napier, just on the outskirts of the central city. We're about 5 minutes from the centre of town. We're on a main arterial, and we have car parks. I think we've got something like 22 car parks for regular sized cars, which means that getting a motorhome in here is a piece of cake. And we've got an ingress and egress of two entry points. We're on a corner section. So it was, and Charles is saying, I live full-time on a beautiful Airstream. Charles, you would get Rambo and Pearl in here, no problem. No problem.
We also, just for those of you who might be motorhoming around, we are located in the center of Christchurch practically. There is actually no center of Christchurch. However, we are lucky that we have very kind neighbors in the Colombo right across the way, which has a simply audaciously massive section for parking motorhomes.
Yeah.
That has no lines. It has its own entrance and egress that is double the width of a regular entrance and egress. It's on a small, quiet street, so you can pull in and out really easily. They are totally welcoming to people parking in there and coming in here for a shop. And you should always go over there and have some lunch, because it's like strangely the most fabulous lunch market in all of Christchurch, which is saying something, because Christchurch has actually started to become quite the eating destination, which living here has not been good for my waistline. But yes, so absolutely. And we have lots of parking too, thankfully. So, and we want to see, I don't know about you, but I want to see people.
Yeah.
I have to say, I was talking with some friends in Europe last night, and some friends in North America, and I realized that I forgot how to use Zoom.
Which is great.
I know, but they're all doing all these effects and showing me all these things on their computer screen, and I'm just like, yes, Zoom, that's a distant memory. So if you're traveling around New Zealand and you want to do something, yarn shops are the place to be.
Yeah. And this weekend, I know that we're going to see a lot here this weekend, because it's it's our first Monday-ized holiday, I think.
Yeah.
Weekend. And the great news for anyone coming to visit, because traditionally often here at the shop quite often closed on public holidays.
Mhm.
But we knew that so many people were traveling around. We had so many inquiry about, are we going to be open this weekend? And because of the Mondayisation, we've been able to do it that the team are going to work on Saturday, our standard hours, 10 to 1, they'll be here. And then they're having the public holiday on Monday. But because Muggins here is, I'm the joint. So for me, public holiday, public schmoliday, it doesn't really matter. So I'm going to work in the shop on Monday. Yes. So which will mean that nothing will balance and everything will be, chaos and a disaster. And if you come in and see me on Monday and I can't find anything, that's just par for the course. But you'll get
been left alone in the
banter.
shop.
You'll get fantastic banter, and I will, have lots of things I can show you about knitting. So that's a good thing.
We have a newsletter going out today, which will inform everyone that we too are open on Saturday. What? Because of the Mondayisation, we're always closed Monday, which works out for us because I do require a day of rest because this doesn't happen on its own. No. So we are open on Saturday as well. Our usual hours, 11 till 3, and we will be here after breakfast bourbon to attempt to entertain all of you.
Well, yes, more than you did last week, sweets.
First of all, I think people still got a lot of entertainment out of that. Let's be honest here. A little too much entertainment, everyone. I was having an allergic reaction. Give a guy a break.
Right. Is that what the kids are calling it these days?
Well, that's what we're calling it this time. It actually was for once. Thank God.
Where are you in Christchurch? Trish, that's a very good question. 22 Stanley Street in Sydenham for Outlaw HQ. And I think you're at, now what are you, HQ at outlaw.com? Is that yours?
At outlawyarn.com.
Outlawyarn.com. There you go, if you need to get hold of people.
You can always flick me through an email. I'm also now, excitingly, events at outlawyarn.com. So
there you go.
You can reach me on more than one channel.
As always, I don't know where we manage. The time always flies. Honestly, Ethan literally jumps on about 3-4 minutes tops before we start. We never plan anything, but we've now after. We've been doing. Actually, we will be having. I should dig it out. We will be
1 year anniversary.
Having our 1 year anniversary soon, probably next month. Since you and I started
doing on the back of your chair. Yes. So before we go any further, this is Crocheted and Bandit. I cannot crochet, and Deb does not remember how she put this together. So if you come into the shop, I can sell you the yarn, but you are on your own on crocheting.
Oh, no, I remember this. She did this in the squares, and then she actually, the outside colour, which name eludes me for the minute.
Tomfoolery.
So she did all the squares, and then she crocheted together the squares, and then she did the border around the outside. That I do remember.
Yes.
Because I kind of was around when she was doing that.
The difficulty is Deb has done this beautifully decorative raised join. In Scallywag, and we cannot reverse engineer how it happened because for those of you who know our wonderful Deborah, she has never followed a pattern the way it's written once.
Yeah, I have to say that's where her and I are kindred spirits. We do have a tendency to do stuff together, and again, but this has happened, and we don't write anything down.
Yeah, and then there's this guy. Everything is like very precisely annotated, and I have followed those patterns like they were the gospel truth.
I know. I mean, this is the man that actually catalogs and files all his swatches, people.
Yeah, it's super useful.
Yes. The differences between you and I.
All right, see me tech edit. I think it's a nightmare. I'm like, so I swatched this 3 times, and it's still not the measurement that you gave me, so we're going to have to reknit that sample. And they're like... Story of my life.
I know. Hey, look, I've still got designs, and I've got a cowl that I did, which I designed for Nomad. And would you believe I actually did it this time last year because I was knitting it while I was in North America, and I think I've been saying to you for a year, I'm going to send that over for editing, and I still haven't done it. It's on my round 2 it list.
I'll make it up eventually to Napier, and I'll just take everything. I'm just going to come with an extra bag that's empty, and I'll just pack everything into the bag and go home and reverse engineer it all into patterns.
I know. Oh, no. Well, I kind of got scribbled notes, sort of.
We have the cast-ons, and that's what matters.
Oh, yeah. No, I'm hopeless. I am genuinely hopeless. But that's all right.
It's a team
It's,
sport.
I mean, sometimes the fun is in the reinvention, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, everybody. So, as I said, if you're around this weekend, either in the south or in the north, come and see us. We are here. Don't forget, our vintage spotlight is on this month. So, vintage DK and vintage abroad, both $4.95 a ball on introductory offer for the month. So, start digging out those patterns. And in fact, I tell you what, I was diving through as well as these vintage patterns. But if you are after something a bit more modern with a bit of colour, actually, I was having a wee look at some of the DK options with young Mr. West. He's got some really neat DK.
He does. The benefit of Stephen producing a DK weight yarn is that Stephen designs a lot in DK weight yarn.
Exactly. So definitely if you're wanting something fun and modern with a neat twist, do jump over and have a look at West Knits because there's plenty there as well. But until then, you and I better go off and do some work.
Yeah.
I know. You've got a store to open in less than 5 minutes.
Yes, the knitting group will storm the trenches momentarily.
Take care, and I will see everybody. Actually, no, I won't see everyone on Monday because I'll be in the shop working.
She'll be in the shop.
I'll be in the shop working. But that's all right. I'll catch up with you guys at this time next week on Thursday. Until then, take care. See you guys later.